Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to you all. Hiragange and Associates LLP is elated to welcome you all to this webinar on issues in intermediary GST. Our speakers for today are CA Madhukar N. Hiragange and CA Rupa Nayak. I'd like to take the pleasure in introducing our speakers for the day. CA Madhukar Hiregange is a partner and at Hiregange and Associates LLP, having 15 offices around India. He has conducted over 1,500 value-added indirect tax reviews audits, focusing on building processes to prevent and correct non-compliances while adding value. He has jointly authored 18 books from 1997 on Central Excise Service Tax, Karnataka VAT, and Excise Service Tax Audit and Central Sales Tax. Further, in GST, he has jointly authored 10 books and primer. As a chairman of Indirect Taxes Committee, he has led a wonderful team and supported the government in implementation of GST in 2016 to 19. He is involved in efforts to make the indirect tax laws in India simple, certain, and fair, and creating an awareness of potential of knowledge of indirect taxes in India. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, sir.
Thank you.
CA Rupa Nayak. She is a partner in Hiragange and Associates leading the consulting and compliance support retainer wing in Bangalore. She has co-authored several books including GST Audit Handbook, Government Perspective, a practical guide to GST on retail estate industry, now in the second edition, a practical guide to GST on textile industry, which is into its second edition too. She's an active speaker in seminars, webinars, including of State Chartered Accountant Association, ICAI branches chapters across India. Hiragangan Academy and currently working on GST Real Estate Books, third edition, as expected to be out in the end of October 2021. She has been actively involved in sharing knowledge through numerous seminars online and in person and articles. She has been regular contributor of articles in the past to Pina Industry Association and Karnataka State's Chartered Accountant Association, Pune ICAI, monthly newsletter and Ernakulam monthly newsletter of ICAI, articles on CA Club, LinkedIn for more than 10 years. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot.
Now I request the speakers to begin the address.
Okay. Madhukar sir, I will be starting. Okay. Yeah. Good evening to all. Today, in the course of the next 1 hour, Madhukar sir and myself, we are going to be deliberating about the issues in the intermediary services under GST law, as well as the way forward which is there. And when we are going to take you through the the past history under service tax in brief about the tax implications as far as the intermediary services was concerned, both under the positive list as well as the negative list based taxation, and then under GST, what has been the developments which have been there as far as the intermediary services are concerned, the various models of working. When is it an intermediary? When is it said to be an outsourced or support services function? When could it fit into the export of services? As well as the certain specified rulings and landmark judgments which are there would also be looked at. And very importantly, we are going to be looking at what may be the way forward in the light of the recent developments, including the circular which has come up in the last few days with regard to intermediary clarification. In addition, we would also be in the end taking up the important questions which I'm sure many of you all would have come to this session with and addressing those as well. So I'll be taking the first part of this session, and Madhukar sir, our senior partner, is going to be giving his expert comments thereafter after my. So can we go to the next? Yeah, I'll give you a brief background about the past history of the intermediary services in the service tax regime. Next. So if you see in the positive list-based taxation, which was there till 2012 June, therein there was no specific carved out category as far as intermediary services. Even these nature of services which are for enabling the supply or sale of this was being treated as an export of services, provided the payments came in foreign exchange and all of that. And thereafter, in the negative list-based taxation, which was put in place from July 2012 onwards in the service tax regime and was there till June 2017 before the GST came into the picture, there also initially the intermediary was defined for the purpose of the place of provision of service rules, which was a set of rules for the purpose of determining what is said to be the place of provision of certain specified kinds of services depending on the nature of service. So therein they said initially only for services the intermediary was defined, and it was defined to mean a broker, an agent, or any other person by whatever name called who arranges or facilitates a provision of service. Only for provision of service. It did not mention or whisper about the goods hereinafter called the main service between two or more persons, but it did not include a person who provides the main service on his own account. So if we see in this old definition, which was there till October 2014, it was only carving out what we may crudely call as commission agent for services, a person who is enabling or arranging for a provision of services between two other persons, inevitably or usually in exchange for a commission. They said these nature of services under Rule 2F read with Rule 2.9 of the place of provision of service rules. The place of provision of service was said to be the location of the provider or the supplier or the service provider. And inevitably that was said to be in India, even though the principal or the beneficiary was outside India, and though it was getting paid for in foreign exchange, still it was being treated very much as taxable under the service tax regime. Then there was a shift which was brought in by way of one change, and they amended from October 2014 and all the time till June 2017 that was applicable, wherein they said with the change in the wordings that intermediary would mean a broker, agent, or any other person who not just arranges or facilitates the provision of service, but also a supply of goods between two or more persons. So they enlarged the entire basket, and this had caused a lot of churn and turmoil in the agents or the commission agents community, which hitherto in the past, especially the commission agents for the goods who were involved for the purpose of sourcing the materials from India to, let's say, the fashion, this apparel garments, these chains of the Europe and the USA, they were all in a state of churn. And also this was equally affecting the others who were actually enabling the sale of the foreign principals goods in India to the domestic customers. And there once again, inevitably, these kinds of agents who were crudely, they were calling themselves as agents and commission agents, were suddenly, jolted into this service tax levy being applicable upon them with effect from October 2014 onwards. And this led to a lot of representations which were being made at that time, to see that and put across the point that, these kinds of activities which were being done, considering that even service tax was something which was consumption-based levy, and the beneficiary or the consumer being outside India, and the specific, carving out of this category and putting it into the intermediary and making it taxable may not be in line with the internationally accepted practices, including in the European Union. And all these representations which were done and put across very diligently by the professionals and the experts in the field, though it was done and there was a lot of a buzz around it that possibly it would be rolled back, but there was no such thing which actually happened. And the fallout of that, as I would recollect, is one, several of these kinds of commission agents or the buying agents or selling agents, they shifted their operations from India to more friendly, tax-friendly locations and destinations. Obviously, that was something. It was the part that, some of them, they just had to bear the costs of it. And the tax cost obviously was something which was to their own account. And that was the, the other fallout when this particular tax was suddenly brought in respect of the agency services for the goods as well from October 2014. Can we go to the next? Yeah. So herein, after the GST came in, which had been put across when the agency services for goods were taxed, even though it was being done for a foreign principal, was that they wanted to bring parity between the agency services for goods and the agency services for the services sector. However, thereafter, they have not tinkered much. And now in GST also, the status quo was continued. And they said that, more or less the same definition was continued even in the GST regime. And the only smaller change which was there was they said it will be the broker, agent, or any other person being an intermediary by whatever name called, who arranges or facilitates the supply, not just of goods or services, but also securities between two or more persons, and does not include a person who supplies the goods or services or both, or securities in one account. This is more or less on the lines which we had in service tax. Government was the mention of the securities. Can we go to the next? Yeah. So the place of supply continued, and therein under the IGST regime, where the location of the supplier or the recipient is outside India, therein they have said that the place of supply is to be determined by going to the section 13 of the IGST Act, and wherein on more or less similar lines to place of provision of service rules, they have set out various baskets of the categorization of the services, like services relating to immobile services performed in respect of goods, services performed in the physical presence of the recipient. So like this, even the intermediary was put into the section 13(8), wherein the definition that continued. And also they said the place of provision or the place of the supply of these services will be the location of the supplier itself. So what was the net impact of this in GST? So here, once again, it brought back the intermediary inevitably into the tax net, even though these services were being given or being consumed for the benefit and client customer who's outside India. And even though there was foreign exchange being earned, but it was again in GST, the same downtrodden position of not being treated as an export of service. Though there were recommendations made, once again, there was a buzz when there was a particular report, the 139th report on the impact of goods and service tax by the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce. They said it should be shifted. This benefit of treating it on par with the other recipient-based services should be continued and export made available. But the recommendation was not considered, though, there was always an anticipation, I would say, in the last 2-3 years that it would be paid heed to and listened to, especially more so because once again, there was a lot of representation which was done. We ourselves from our office, even in the pre-GST as well as in the subsequent, we have made representations in this regard on behalf of the, buying and selling agents associations. However, this drafting and submitting of the representations has not been heeded to. So the next slide. Yeah. So here, let's first of all understand the nature of the service. What is this intermediary service? Because like I said, there were several of the segments, I would say a large segment of this agency service providers who were loosely calling themselves as agents or commission agents or buying agents or selling agents. But if you look at very closely at what was it that is the function which was being done by them, the role which was taken up by them was not just limited to arranging for the supply of the goods or the services between two parties, being buyer or seller or a supplier of materials or a foreign procurer Actually, if you go to the real facts of the transaction, goes far beyond it. So what is it that, is something which is considered to be a pure intermediary versus somebody who may be calling themselves, as per their normal common word usage or parlance as an intermediary or as an agent or a commission agent, but their role actually may not even be covered within the scope of an intermediary. So for that, first we may want to see what is it that intermediary does. So an intermediary is one who arranges the sales or the the supply which could be there, which is taking place. It could be the sales or purchase of goods or the sales or purchase of the services, and between two or more persons. So if you see, there are three different parties and there are two different supplies which are being involved in the strictly what we call as intermediary services. One being the supply between the principal and the third party, as well as the supply of own services to the principal, which is generally for a fee or for a commission. So here, if you were to see, an intermediary being a person who cannot alter the nature or value of supply which he facilitates or enables. So if there is some sourcing of materials which is happening from Tirupur to, let's say, Mark and Spencer, which is located in England, then those materials which are being supplied or sourced, those cannot be altered, the nature or the value of it, which is being sent from the Indian manufacturer to the foreign sourcer. So that is one thing. And also possibly the consideration is, one indicator is that it will be a percentage of the fee. So whatever is the value of the goods which are being sourced or the services, it could be software services which are being supplied between two parties, could be a Indian, seller and a foreign procurer, or it could be vice versa. The consideration is in terms of a percentage basis, which could be at a very low percentage. It could be 2%, 3%, or up to even 5%. And also it could critically be realizable by this intermediary once the payments have been made between these seller and buying parties. Of course, the test of agency to be satisfied that the person is somebody who is acting on behalf of the other and excludes a person who supplies on own account. Now, what is this own account is something which we may like to look at as well. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So herein, it's a person who is not arranging or facilitating, the goods or services being provided to the customer by third person. The person himself is providing the goods or services to the client. It could be that the client is somebody who wants to procure the goods from India, continuing my earlier example, being Mark and Spencer, which is abroad. And then they want to be very clear about the, due diligence being done of the supplier or the manufacturer of India from, say, Tirupur. So they may appoint this local person who is there on the ground and who will then actually go to that particular Indian supplier's factory, see the working conditions, see whether child labor is there, see whether proper sanitation facilities are there, whether light, air, ventilation is there, whether food is being provided, whether, the adequate safety precautions for the COVID are being ensured. And all these things will be done much, much before finalizing on these particular manufacturers from Tirupur by the foreign Mark and Spencer. In fact, if you see, in the context of somebody who is not an intermediary, a person who does an own account, they will not even be having the powers to finalize on the orders. The orders finalizing will be done only by the foreign principal who is there. So what happens is that at the most, a list of the possible, suppliers of India may be getting provided by the Indian vendor or the Indian, buying agent to the foreign, say, Mark and Spencer. But the role and responsibilities will not be for enabling the supply of the goods from the local manufacturer of Tirupur to, say, Mark Spencer of Europe. But the role will be something which will be prior to placing of the order, prior to sourcing of the goods, and also post the placing of the order or post the sourcing to ensure the order is fulfilled in the particular specified manner as per the standards which are put in place by Mark and Spencer. So herein, if we see, the roles and responsibilities of a person who is doing these services in known account would be more akin to a person who is doing a part of the activities which the foreign principal was supposed to do, but instead it is being given or outsourced to the Indian party or the Indian vendor or the Indian buyer, who in turn does the diligence, gives a report, sends the emails, gives an update, checks on the quality of the materials after the production is done, ensures the goods are packed adequately, ensures that the goods are sent to the port, and basically does all the other order fulfillment services or the pre-ordering services, and does not have any role or responsibility to play in the actual placing of the orders. And also the agreement would be to work on a principal to principal basis in these kinds of cases where the work is being done for the foreign principal on own account. So here possibly we can look at one of the rulings. I've given a reference here as to what may be the possible indicators when we say that somebody is acting on their own account. So in this case, which was actually affirmed by the Supreme Court of India in the erstwhile service tax regime, wherein there was some goods or software which was being supplied on own account, and there was no commission being paid by the foreign vendor and the principal who was there, and the goods were being independently, or the software is being independently purchased and independently being sold. There was no mention of no relationship of principal agent was not there with the foreign principal, and consequently the payment also which was being made was not related to the payment received from the customer, and they said that the services are on own account and you cannot say that they're an intermediary. So very importantly, the ownership of these services by the person who is on the ground here for the foreign principal, and the liability of providing these services and the responsibility for providing these services also is taken upon them. Vis-a-vis, if you look at an intermediary who will just be helping to secure the orders, usually for a smaller amount. Can we go to the next slide? Let's look at a few of the business models which are there and what could be the implications. Yeah. So the business models, like I said, is one is that they may be supply of the pre-sale and order fulfillment service. I gave you the example of Mark and Spencer, foreign principal, and the Indian sourcing agent who could be there. Also, there could be a possibility that there is or an element of order support services, ensuring the finalization of orders. Few elements could be there, but the major portion of the activity would be that of an outsourced support service being done by the Indian vendor or the Indian party to the foreign principal. Sometimes we also have both services, what we call as outsourced services, as well as a portion of the intermediary services, which is for finalizing on the orders, securing of the orders. And sometimes we could have separate agreements as well. So what could be the various impacts which could be there when these various nature of working modalities are adopted? Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So here, if we are to see that the support services, it could include services such as there could be due diligence, recommending of suitable suppliers, maintaining of suppliers list, market research, post-order activities. In fact, in the realm of sales-related order fulfillment, it is often seen that these so-called commission agents or the selling agents are not just doing, the function of giving the mailing list of the potential purchasers in India, but they'll also see what is the requirement in the Indian market and preferences in India. They may do a little survey to see what is the need of the product, what kind of customization the Indian customer wants for the particular product which is going to be supplied for the foreign vendor or the foreign principal. They could also be submitting periodic reports to the foreign party about the status of the surveys being done. They could do some advertisement in India. They could take part in trade shows. So if you see the entire twist or the entire scope of the activities is more aligned towards pre-sale or post-sale related activities. In selling again could fall into outsourced support services and not so much into the intermediary services category. But obviously the agreement becomes somewhat of a very important aspect to actually at first glance see what is it that is being done. Because remember, an agreement is understood even as per the decisions which are there from the Supreme Court of India, that these agreements represent the intention of the parties and is taken to as an understanding of what is actually transpired. So wherever involves these kinds of detailed support being given, be it for the purpose of pre-sale or pre-procurement or post-sale or post-procurement, it has to be ensured that the agreement is very clear on what is being done. And remember, it's not just sufficient that the agreement has the clarity. It may also be very important to see what are the additional documentations which could be provided. Because it's all very good to say that, the nature of the work being done is a market survey. But then, is there a market survey report? Is some kind of a weak report sent to the foreign party about who are the parties or the potential purchasers, customers who are approached, what is the age demographic, which area of India, North India, South India, which product was discussed with them, what was the requirement expressed by them. So like this, it may not just be sufficient also to limit ourselves to have a clear agreement. It may be very, very important to see that, we have the other supporting email communications. It could be a report, like I said, which could be getting submitted over the mail every month or, quarterly or whatever it is. So in all these cases, there is certainly going to be a high likelihood that, it is much more possible to establish that the nature of service is not an intermediary and instead it's an outsourced function. And like we saw in this latest circular, which I'll be covering a little further, it is saying that, the outsourced services which are there, that could fall into the recipient category under section 13.2, where recipient is a foreign principal and also paid foreign exchange and all the other export of service conditions are satisfied, then it is possible to claim that it is not to be taxed under LUT, and also the credit corresponding to it could be available. Here, some more clear-cut indicators could be one, if wherever there is, let's say, a high percentage of commission, again, we cannot just look at the commission amount and say it's a payment done as a commission, so it has to be something which is an intermediate. So what is more important to be seen is if it's a commission which is of the higher order, like I said, say 10%, 15%, then possibly they're doing some value additive services. They're not just scouting for the customers, scouting for the suppliers. They're doing a role which is far beyond it. So that may be one of the indicators, especially where the commission is of a higher amount, which could be there. One more could be if it's a cost plus basis. And then obviously the documents, like I said, the agreements, the SOWs, all these could also be used to add for not at all something which is a agency or a commission agency service, but it's more in the realm of the outsourced support services. And then it could certainly fall into the export of services basket. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. So in our experience, we have, of course, come across quite a few scenarios of various permutations and combinations of the agreements being entered between the foreign principal and the Indian supplier. Like I said, there could be a single agreement for giving the support services as well as the intermediary, but there could be separate scope being set out independent of each other. Independent is what may happen is that we can actually claim that the support portion of it with a separate, consideration, which could be on a cost plus basis, that could fall into the recipient category, recipient basket under section 13.2, where the place of supply is determined as per 13.2 to be outside India. It's the foreign party who is liable to make the payment of consideration is there. And then, they can satisfy the conditions, other conditions of export of services as well. However, what happens if there is both elements, but there is a single payment? So there could be a few elements of the pre-sale support. There could be a little amount of a market research survey being done, but certainly there is, clear-cut mention, or they are clearly involved for finalizing the orders as well. They are having the powers to finalize the customers, just to Then we may have to look at the composite supply, or where there's a single price and there are two independent supplies being given for single price. It could even go as a mixed supply, and then taxable at the rate which is applicable for the highest tax rate category, which is intermediary services. So what may be a suggestion to avoid these kind of pitfalls or disputes or gray areas? Preferable segregate the support services outside of the intermediary, have a separation of the agreement, that is best, separate consideration if you cannot have a separate agreement, and then have a separate support service scope and intermediary scope being given separately. And very important also to notice, there have been a few instances wherein sometimes there may be a certain, commission which is getting paid to certain of the key persons organization based. Even that could be something which can be looked up as a red flag by the department. They'll say, this person is being paid a commission and seems to be an intermediary. So never mind all the fine words used in the agreement. We don't think this is support service. So care needs to be taken even in these cases to see that, even if there is any kind of a payment which is linked, it could be more to do with the performance of the person for incentivizing a person, and nothing to do with the finalizing of the orders between the foreign principal and the Indian customer. So all these safeguards to be taken so that the local persons who may be just involved for marketing or advertising, appropriately they are being paid performance bonuses or performance incentives and not being called as sales commission, very loosely worded, leading to a red flag and consequent demand from department, which we have seen in our experience. Some of the companies around the place faced it. Okay, so now can we go to the next one? Next slide. Separate agreement, as I said, that may be the best thing. So a separate agreement and separate consideration, and wherever it is consideration based on a cost plus could be preferable for the support services. That could be treated as a commission-based separate agreement and offer it to tax at 18% as an intermediary. Can we go to the next? Now we come to the the recent development which has been there. In fact, this was the actual entire triggering point which has led to the flurry of interest which we are seeing in this intermediary services and its taxability in the recent few days. So this circular which has come out with the expressed intention to clarify with regard to the intermediary services. And while clarifying about the intermediary services, if you ask me, seems to be more a basic extraction of the provisions and just putting therein some of the concepts which were, as it is very obvious. It is more a case of stating of the obvious, as we say. Okay, and which was already very well known. So there is nothing which is imparting extra clarity which was not already there in the amongst the persons or amongst the suppliers of these nature of services or the support services. So herein they have clarified with regard to the number of parties required, like we already said, the number of suppliers which are there, and also that an intermediary service provider would have the character of an agent, broker, or any similar person. And again, they are just extracting and replicating and saying that does not include a person supplying on own account. But one point which they have also mentioned is that subcontracting for a service is not intermediary service. And also they have kind of like given a disclaimer there in the end by saying that whether or not a specific service falls under intermediary would depend upon the facts of the specific case. So it's like they're washing their hands off whatever, including the exams given in that circular. Can we go to the next one? So minimum of 3 parties is something which is required, is what is told in this circular. Somebody who is facilitating between 2 or more other persons. And also that there is a main supply and ancillary supply, that is the person who is doing the arranging of the principal transaction between the other parties. Can we go to the next? Yeah. And they are telling that the ancillary supply is clearly identifiable and distinguishable from the main selling. If it's a supply on a principal to principal basis, then it's not an intermediary. Of course, that is the entire issue. That is, when is it said to be a supply on a principal to principal basis? Can we go to the next? Yeah. So the supplier of the main services, here in the case of an intermediary, main supply will be between two principals, and the ancillary is the service of facilitating. And can we go to the next one? I think this is same thing. Yeah. Get to the rulings. So herein, just before getting into the rulings, I would like to bring to attention one point. They have given examples to say when is the main service said to be subcontracted. So therein they have given a couple of one or two examples wherein they say that if there is a person who is a developer of software and who has got a contract for developing or designing a software, and then one part of that activity is being given to somebody else to be done, then they have said it's outsourcing of this part of the main service, either fully or partly, if that is done to one or more subcontractors, then the subcontractor himself is becoming a person who is acting on a principal to principal and giving the main supply, and no longer said to be a facilitator or a enabler. But there is one more aspect to this entire thing which we can like to look at, which when we look at these rulings which are there, which can shed further light on what is the thought processes as far as the intermediary and taxability and export of service is concerned. Okay. So there have been High Court rulings. Again, if we see between the Bombay High Court itself, there was a case called Jani, wherein there was opposing views which were held, the contrasting views in the DB of the Bombay High Court. They said that the place of supply for intermediary services by one of the honorable justices, they said that it would be in accordance with 13(8)(b), in line with the constitutional provisions, and they followed the Material Recycling Association case, which had said that it should be taxable to CGST and SGST. Where the judge, Justice Ujjal Biyan, said the place of supply is ultra-virus to the Constitution of India, for the reasoning which has been gone through in detail, referring to specific articles as well as of the Constitution of India, and bringing out the point that there cannot be this extraterritorial operation of the taxing on the transactions which are taking place outside jurisdiction of India, and also levying the local taxes on these kinds of transactions is something which is not aligned, and it is going beyond the powers which have been conferred. So this is the position which was taken as far as the Bombay High Court, with the differing contrasting views which were there, and then this matter is presently yet to come out with the final view. Coming to the Material Recycling Association of India, it asks to frame laws for interstate supplies. So herein they have said that this is not ultra-virus or unconstitutional. And however, they have said make a representation to redress the grievance in suitable manner. And they disposed of the matter there. So as we can see that more or less presently the views which have been expressed are contrary to each other. And there is no final settled view which has emerged in the GST law, and nor has there been any movement of the government implementing or moving the intermediary back to the recipient category where it could be covered and indeed should be covered. Can we go to the next, look at some service tax rulings as well? So these are some of the rulings which certainly would carry a lot of weight even today if you see in the GST regime, because more or less the nature of the activities which were getting covered in the recipient-based category in the erstwhile service tax regime in the POPs, place of provision of service rules, and before that under the Rule 3, which was there in the export of service rules in the recipient-based categories, these have not changed much, even vis-a-vis the GST provisions which have been given in 13(2). So even now, the various support services such as the advice regarding market situation, advertisement, undertaking marketing, promotional, taking part in seminars, talk shows, events, everything in this GoDaddy, though it was an advanced ruling, it was clearly said it's naturally bundled and it's a business support service, in terms of the concept which was there of bundled services under the erstwhile negative risk-based taxation. So this is something we can take a cue from, understanding from, and in fact, this continues to be very much relevant even in the GST law. Similarly, there were some other decisions which have been extracted here, Sunrise Immigration and also in CST systems, wherein in all these cases, wherein there was elements of marketing, support, advertising, promotional services being given, they've said these are on principal to principal basis, and it's an export of service falling into the recipient category. So these can certainly be used as a guideline to see whether it's applicable to particular own set of facts, and it then certainly can rely upon these to continue to contend that these are export of services. Can we go to the next one? Yeah. There have been a lot of the suppliers from India who are doing a variety of value-added services to foreign principals, foreign clients, foreign group companies, and have been indeed claiming their activities of these nature of outsourced support, value-added sales, marketing functions, or order fulfillment functions, and they're claiming it to be covered in the recipient category and also falling into the export. So in all these cases, wherein it's treated or claimed to be an export of service, it would be very much required to take certain precautions or safeguards to ensure that the department, even if they were to look deeply and closely at the transactions, would not be able to, and even if any issue is raised, it can certainly be closed by indicating that why the nature of the activity is said to be falling into recipient category and why it is said to be an export. Some of the precautions which could be there is the agreement has to be as per the actual nature of service, and agreement not to have the use of unnecessary words where it is not an agent, using words as an agent, using making payment on commission basis, better not to, consideration being a fixed sum of money, and if it's variable, then the not based on sales values or service values, correct code, not use the word, and some deliverables. It's not just sufficient that the agreement says it is being done, it should be demonstrated to be done. That is most important. So it could be reports, mail communications. Receipt of consideration should not depend upon realizing by the foreign client. Powers to finalize orders should not be there. Better this aspect is made clear. And of course, intimation to the department to ensure there is no sustainable demands. And also, there is one more aspect here. Several times, these so-called commission agents have a great deal of proficiency and technical depth in the subject. So if it's a person who is helping to get orders for some advanced nature of software, then possibly that person will have that kind of a qualification in engineering, some kind of an advanced, degree in engineering, by which it is able to show that indeed the services being provided are some kind of a consulting or a technical consultation, with the requisite skill sets which are there with that particular supplier of India. So those also could be some of the added, points which could be used to support that the nature of service is not at all that of an intermediate or enabler of the supply. It is something far beyond it. Can we go to the next? Yeah. Now we come to the other aspect of it, that is about unjust enrichment. So whether it applies for the exports, it is not applicable. First of all, as recipient is located outside taxable territory. Now, why do we bring in the concept of unjust enrichment over here? The reason being that there may be a situation, there could be a scenario wherein several of the Indian suppliers who want to be risk averse, who do not want to have any issues, future demands with interest and penalty, they may say, okay, we don't want to take a chance. There is a certain element of slight or a small element of intermediary. So majorly the activity which we are doing is in outsourced services. We don't want to take a chance and we are going to pay the taxes. So this, when you're going to claim a refund, assuming that there's going to be further clarity forthcoming, or this, nature of service is shifted into the recipient category, then certainly the refund can be claimed back, and while claiming back as a refund, this unjust enrichment will not hit, because it is for the purpose of the exports. It can be said that there is no question of having collected towards the taxes from the foreign party, which is usually the case also. The foreign party will not agree. And most of the time, I would say all of the times, it's going to go out of the pocket of the Indian supplier itself. And wherever they are looking to get the refunds to the extent that it is said to be an only this will be something which could be not applicable. There are a couple of rulings also on that which have been extracted over here. And can we go to the next one? Yeah. So herein about the way ahead, what are the options which we do have? See, wherever it is very clear that the nature of the service is that of an outsourced service, or it's a technical consultancy service, or it is some kind of a consulting engineer services, then I would say that it is quite clear. Ensure that the agreement is aligned. Ensure that all the deliverables being provided, one sample set is being maintained on the file with printout, so that it's always very clear that vis-a-vis what is mentioned in the agreement, that is what is the deliverable also which is being given, and what are the deliverables being given in the form of a report or an email or some kind of a communication, so that the bona fides of these kinds of transactions which can clearly fall or fit into the recipient category should not get questioned. Okay. One more thing which may be the possibilities, especially where there is this little element of this marketing, advertising, sales promotion and all that, it is very much possible that, it is ensuring that even the transcripts of the conversations, recordings of the calls to understand the technical specifications, the calls which are done with the local customers, Indian customers, to understand their preferences, all these are recorded and also maintained, because even that could be used as a supporting when it is being claimed that this is nothing but a support service and it is falling into the export of services basket. However, coming to the parties who are making the payment voluntarily of the GST, because it's an undisputed option, because their activity certainly involves intermediary and they do not want to take a chance, there of course a cost to the company, but they can certainly pay the GST under protest to avoid the disputes and claim refund in future when it is coming out in their favor. And can we go to the next? So herein, there have also been lots of disputes, as we were saying in the past, where, there are ongoing matters being also fought, wherein there has been a demand, contending it to be a intermediary service covered under Rule 9, taxable, even in the older regime of the service tax. So where the issue is presently under dispute, they may have got a show cause notice. It may have, gone against them in the initial stage. Now they may be in appeal. So, of course, the documentation very important to ensure that the support is there to substantiate that it is why it should fall into export. Relying on the past decisions, usage of the latest circulars if it's in a dispute in the GST period, and for the relief to really come for a, and of course, the other option is to make a payment under protest and then seeking for the refund without time limit once there is a favorable from the future. So with this, I've come to the end of the my deliberations. Madhukar sir, if you can please request you to add your inputs as well.
Thank you, Rupa. I think you have covered pretty comprehensively. Not much I have to add. One point which I wanted to bring in the initial stages, Rupa told us that in October 2014, there was a change. There was a shift from the recipient base to the place where the intermediary is located. And the intermediary was defined also. This U-turn, was it something which was well thought of, is something which is unclear even today. The industry was very clear this was not international good practice. And what happened here is the intermediary was sitting outside India, who was catering to the the importers in the foreign country or the exporters in the foreign country. He is no longer liable because he is located outside India. So that person in his country, he considers that an export. And we don't consider that as liable to reverse charge because he's located outside India. So therefore, there is a, what I would say, gap. Both ways he is gaining. And the intermediary in India is having the opposite impact. The customer outside India is not willing to accept that there is a liability. And therefore, he says, whatever I pay you is inclusive of the GST or the earlier service tax. And therefore, these people became uncompetitive to the extent of 18% directly. 18% is a lot. In business, the margins could be 5%, 10%. So if a 18% margin is fostered, then what will happen? People started going to the neighboring countries. Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and all these countries, believe it or not, have taken advantage of the export of textiles immensely, much, much more than India. Multiplications of Indian turnover they are doing. Being, tiny part of India if you were to consider so. So unnecessarily government of India allowed business to fly out of India. This was, I think, very sad part of it. Second point, which is very important while understanding either in the service tax regime or in the GST regime, is that in both these taxes, there were concept of bundled service. And then the essential service is what makes it so. Therefore, in either service tax regime or in GST regime, if there is no agency, that is, I cannot negotiate on behalf of the principal, then there ends my intermediary possibility. I become clearly a business support service provider or a business auxiliary, incidental service provider, as understood in the service tax regime, which is same logic can be taken in GST. Second, very important aspect is Rupa talked about the clarity in service tax. In service tax, the only chance for intermediary to come is if it is a single service and as an agent. If I provide him a list of names, these are the factories which you can export to, or these are the factories which are interested in export of, say, the textiles. This is not a intermediary. This is only marketing consultancy. And marketing consultancy will come under either management consultancy or marketing consultancy itself, which is not an intermediary. Therefore, if we look at service tax regime, as long as you are not agent, there is no liability at all. So all of you who have had orders against you in the past in service tax, maybe it's a good idea to go for a refund in service tax, and I think you'll have a reasonably good chance. As far as GST is concerned, the clarity has not come thanks to the various contrary rulings of the Bombay High Court, where there is a differing judgment also. And therefore, while we are clear that possibly GST will follow service tax, if you ask me, my understanding is GST will follow service tax 95%. Just like I was sure of the mutuality concept applying in service tax and even in GST, our view is that finally mutuality will apply to GST also. Just the same amount of, what I would say, confidence, I can say that largely GST will follow service tax, and therefore, unless you are an agent, you need not bother. You can claim the export refund. Remember, it's not only the refund which you get on your inputs, you also get the export refund under your FTP. There could be disputes there. I'm not saying no, but it could make a lot of difference. I'm talking about 20-odd% of difference. Therefore, we thought that this particular session was very useful to all of you for enhancing your knowledge, number one, and number two, taking action to maybe get back money which the government of India has taken. Remember, Article 265 says, no tax shall be collected without authority of law. And today, just because they can dispute it doesn't mean they have the authority. Authority of law is very clear what the law says and what is interpreted by the courts. And we feel that you have a good case. We would be quite happy to answer any questions. Rupa will answer. If I have anything to add, I will surely add. Thank you very much for joining us for this session. Questions? Namrata, you can see if any questions have come or people can ask also.
If anybody has any queries, you can drop it in the chat box or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you.
We are going to share the slides after the presentation as well.
Anushri, you can not only share the slide, after you have uploaded on Hiragangi Associates, you can possibly share the videos.
Yes, sir.
Link.
Yes, sir. Can do that.
Yeah, and when you send it, mark it to me. I'll also put it for other people who have not been able to watch this particular session.
Yes, sir. We'll do that.
Investment advisory services. Company, okay, there is a question here. Company provides investment advisory services to a foreign company to invest in the startups in India. Certainly, this should fall into this advisory services, which in turn gets covered into the recipient-based category, and payment being made in foreign exchange. Certainly, this could fall into an export of services.
It is also not something which is being disputed as of date. It is clear you can go for that as well as go for your FTP benefits.
Need clarity on the marketing services. I think there is Charan who wants to get unmuted so that he can ask the question. Can you do the needful? Yeah, Charan, you can ask the question.
Hi, Rupa. Many thanks for this presentation, and Madhukar sir, thank you for this initiative. So, two questions I have. One with respect to this intermediary services. See, generally, all these sales and marketing are classified as intermediary services. So, I see that there are, even in your presentation, you had mentioned that the place of supply for this intermediary services will be the location of the service provider. So, when I'm rendering it to my US entity, should I charge IGST or should I charge CNS? This is a big doubt which I think even the big fours are not able to tell it. They say both opinions are correct and there is no loss of revenue. So I wanted to get clarity on this, first thing. Second thing is, because of this new circular which has come out recently, is it going to justify the stand wherein all these captive development services, captive development centers who are rendering this market support services outside India? Will this strengthen their argument and avoid the litigation?
Okay. Coming to your first point, I think you had wanted the clarity as far as this nature of marketing services. So here, there are two possible. One possibility is that this marketing, though it is being called as marketing or paid for in terms of commission, it may be just something which is far beyond marketing. It may involve actually understanding the market. It may be market research, market survey, and all these things may be involved. In which case, they may not be or whisper of an intermediary. It may fall into the recipient basket very clearly. And in which case, if the payment is received in foreign exchange, why should we look at CGST, SGST, or IGST? It may be treated as an export of services. So this, just because there is a usage of marketing or there is certain amount of marketing related support services involved, would not take it to intermediary unless there is certainly an enabling of some supply. So this may be more an outsourced function is what we may also like to look at. And if yes, then it may fall into export of services. Coming to your other point that whether it should come into CGST, SGST or IGST, I would say that it will come into, without getting into the constitutional validity of taxing this, the CGST and the SGST. Madhukar sir, please add your thoughts.
Yeah. Charan, there's two things I want to share with you. First is if you are negotiating on behalf of the US entity, then you could be called an intermediary, number one. Number two, whether even then you have to pay is another question. If you look at Article 286, territorial jurisdiction, you cannot get into other countries' territory and tax it. And therefore, when I receive money from outside India, the fact that our place of supply is deemed to be in India itself is suffering from some constitutional challenge, which Rupa had referred to. In case you are not negotiating, of course, exactly what she said is there. It's not an export at all. And I would say that that's all I have to add, other than I agree with her. These are your additional points for support as far as the first one is concerned. I think he had two queries. The second one was something else. I don't remember.
Can you just repeat the second question, Charan?
Yeah, the second
Charan,
question
there was
is,
another query.
yeah. So the second question is now, in the light of this new circular that has come up, rather, as you mentioned, it is just a reproduction of the text in detail. So whether this will strengthen our arguments stating that this is not an intermediary. All these captive service centers which are in India, who are servicing the US customers or any customers abroad.
Okay, if you ask me, it will be used to support these kinds of captive, support service providers. But while ensuring that, is there an intermediary element at all, like Madhukar sir was telling? If that is not there, then certainly this
See, that's the
can
thing.
be used to support their function to the Indian entity from the foreign company.
Exactly, because all these lower authorities are just debating and disallowing this one, stating because intermediary is a big term, and they just say this is an intermediary, and they're just left and right disallowing the this one even without application of mind. Whether now this circular, since it says three parties should be involved and not acting as a broker and all those things. So whether is this going to even internally from a department standpoint going to help something?
I'll answer that, Rupa. You see, what happens, Charan, is that one of the things you should understand is the psyche of this department. These Lallu Kunchus normally don't understand the law, and they don't go into application of their mind.
Exactly.
But circular is like Bible. So what you have to do is, how can you go against your circular is the argument you have to put in paper and put that they are bound by their circulars. There are decisions which Rupa can share. If you send her an email, she'll share a couple of decisions which say that department cannot take a view which is against the circular. Now, whether the circular is, they are against the circular or not, those points, those 3 points which have been made in the circular, you should hammer that. See, sometimes it's better to hammer these people with the hammer which they can understand, which is the circular, rather than a Supreme Court judgment or, like I mentioned, Article 286 and all. They just don't know what you're talking about. Better give them the circular and tell them how it is covering, and the fact that if you go against the circular, then you will be violating the understanding of the CBIC itself and the commissioner and the chief commissioner and also the whatever CBIC members. That is something you can do.
Noted, sir. Many thanks.
Many times what happens, the softer way of taking care of these people is much more effective than giving them a ironclad opinion. Better just give them a letter which says that the circular is very clear. I'm following in the circular because of the following reasons. And then if they have any doubt, please come back to me. Normally then they will not put up the objection to the same extent as otherwise. I think there was one more question, Rupa. Back office something.
And that was the one which we had answered. So back office service provider
Out of
company. We said that it could fall into the export of services. Both are independent companies. It will fall into the export of services. So it will come in recipient-based category under Section 13(2) of the IGST Act. And since it is being done to a foreign company, then it can fall into export of service and paid for in foreign exchange. And both are distinct persons, being distinct legal entities. On that aspect also, they had issued one separate circular to clarify on that. And just to support on Madhukar sir's point, that is that decision where they say that department is bound by their circular is of Dhiren Chemicals. None of the Supreme Court judgments which is there in this regard.
So Chitra, you also can use, in case there's dispute, use the circular rather than the case laws. Case laws will come in case there's a dispute. Best way to do is to avoid dispute. And also claim many of the people are not claiming FTP benefits. They should claim that. I think looks like we have covered all the questions, unless anybody has any question.
Please feel free to drop a mail to us. You can mail me at roopa@hiregange.com, ROOPA@hiregang.com. If there are any further queries as well, we'll be very glad to get back to you.
Good evening then. Have a safe week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Thanks to everybody.
On behalf of Hiragange and Associates LLP and the participants, I would like to express my gratitude to our speakers for accepting our request to handle the webinar today. I would also like to thank the participants for their active participation in this endeavor to serve you all. With that, I would like to end today's session by wishing you all a very good evening and